Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Laura Kendall, and I lead the marketing efforts here at InnoVint. Very excited to have everyone joining us today. Happy Monday. For those of you that are not familiar with InnoVint, we are a winery operating system. And our mission here is to help wine businesses grow, make, and sell wine more efficiently with the help of our software platform. That software platform consists of vineyard tracking, wine production, cost accounting, compliance solutions, and more. But that's not why we're here today. We are very excited to be putting on this series, the Wine Business Health Series, where over 3 events we're discussing with winery leaders, like the ones you're going to be chatting with today, for their strategies on how to improve winery financial, operational, and cultural health. So last week we had a session on financial health that is now available to everyone on demand. Next week we'll be discussing cultural health, but today we're focusing on operational health. So without further ado, let's get started. We have a jam-packed session today, lots to cover. So I will start with some housekeeping. I'm also going to spend a few minutes to give everyone a sneak peek into the results of, early results of our State of Wine Business Health Survey. Then I'll pass it to our experts for our panel discussion, Ashley, Ryan, and Juan. And we'll save about the last 10 minutes or so to answer all of your questions. So we'll get into how you can ask your questions now. So little housekeeping, everyone is muted. We do have the chat open and available, so feel free to jump in and maybe everyone can share where in the world they're dialing in from. We are recording this, so don't worry if you miss taking notes or any of the key takeaways. We'll be sending the full recording via email after today's event. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will get to as many of those as we can in the last section of today. And then lastly, we want to know what you think about the session today. You'll be prompted with a survey at the end, and we'd love to have you fill that out and let us know if the content was helpful and any other type of content that you'd like to see more of. So in May and June of this year, we ran an industry survey, which many of you may have seen and participated in. Our goal is to assess the current state of wine business health across the 3 vital dimensions that this series is covering: financial, operational, and cultural. We collected over 450 responses from winery leaders and professionals at wineries at different sizes and regions. We're in the process of analyzing this data, but we've already uncovered some insightful takeaways that are pretty relevant to these conversations. So wanted to provide a little sneak peek into the data before we dive into today's discussion. So first, we asked how winery professionals would rate their company's operational health and efficiency. 66% of professionals believe that their company has good or excellent operations, and 91% believe they are at average operations or greater. So while we're seeing a lot of doom and gloom in the media as it relates to the wine industry, this data is really exciting and suggests that despite those greater headwinds, wineries do have a good handle on their operations, and there isn't a tremendous amount of dysfunction. The majority of wineries are feeling healthy. Respondents also shared the appetite for constantly improving, especially considering external factors like costs impacting wineries across the board. So we have this cohort of wineries that are seemingly operationally healthy. What makes them unique? So we looked at the data compared to a few other factors related to winery health. So let's take a look at those quickly. We asked winery professionals to also rate their overall health. Did they have or believe that their company has average, great, or poor health? Not so surprising, there's a clear connection between the two. Operational efficiency is fundamentally linked to the overall health of a winery. That is to say, unless operations are running smoothly, we probably aren't perceiving a winery as healthy in general. We also asked how they'd rate their wineries in terms of their financial health. Did they have great, average, or poor financial stability? And we see a strong correlation between the two, with 71% of wineries with good or excellent operational health also having great financial health. But wineries that have a poor grasp on their operations are seeing significantly less success financially, with only 6% of them rating themselves as great. Then we looked at the impact of operational health on employee satisfaction and company culture. And this is something that the panelists will speak a bit about today. There's also a very strong link between it. 94% of winery professionals that believe their company is in great operational health are also very satisfied in their job. And 89% of wineries with great operational health have a great and thriving company culture. So as you can see in the charts, as their operational health declines, employee satisfaction and perception of the company's culture also tends to decline. Lastly, wineries that run best-in-class operations are also more involved in the community. 78% of operationally healthy wineries are actively involved, compared to only 40% of wineries with poor operational health. So in summary, this data is showing that our three vital dimensions of winery health, financial, operational, and cultural, are all connected. They are all related to each other. This is really why at InnoVint we're so passionate about this series and getting this data out there, finding ways for us all to have these discussions and share practical approaches to running a healthy wine business. So the report will be coming out soon, and I'm excited to be sharing that with all of you, so stay tuned. But with that, let's get started to the meat of today's conversation, our panel. So I'm going to pass things over to Ashley Leonard, InnoVint CEO and founder, who, after earning her V&E degree at UC Davis, spent about a decade making wine and running wineries before starting InnoVint over 10 years ago. So no doubt she's a very credible moderator for today's discussion. Ashley, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you, Laura. That data was super insightful and, of course, very relevant. As she said, I'm back for round 2 of 3 of facilitating these valuable discussions with industry leaders, this time about winery operational health. The word operations covers so much ground, and the definition can change based on the context. I was just talking to my husband this morning about what operations means, and in his world and his industry, it's different than my world and the wine industry. So I actually looked up a general definition of operational health last night, and I wanted to read this to you. So Google says, operational health can refer to a business's operational efficiency. It's the relationship between an organization's output and input that, when healthy, helps businesses cut down on unnecessary costs while increasing revenue. It's what businesses strive to do: produce a high-quality product at scale with as few resources as possible. Pretty powerful. We're going to cover as much of this landscape as possible today with you in these short 40 or so minutes before the Q&A. So without further ado, here we go. I'm joined by 2 incredibly respected, highly experienced winery chief operating officers. If you know anything about Northwest Wine, you likely know them both. If not, you at least know the organizations that they've worked for over the past 2 decades. I'm going to introduce them and tell you why I asked them to be a part of this conversation today. So first, let's meet Ryan. Ryan Pennington is the Chief Operating Officer at Le Col No. 41. Le Col was founded in 1983, just the 3rd winery to establish in the Walla Walla Valley. The 3rd generation of the family continues to run the winery today. Ryan was brought on about a year ago to oversee nearly all the business operations, finance, HR, marketing, sales, and soon to be production, as the current co-owner and managing winemaker takes a step back from the daily operations. Prior to Le Col, Ryan was with St. Michel Wine Estates for 11 years, with his most recent role being Vice President of Communications and Corporate Affairs, so overseeing marketing and brand management. It's quite a high impact role for the largest, most recognizable producer in Washington State at that time. Prior to that, Ryan was with the Washington State Wine Commission, the marketing agency that represents all growers and wineries in the state of Washington. Needless to say, he's been a major influencer in Washington wine for almost 2 decades. When I met Ryan, he was immediately so transparent and open about his business initiatives and his challenges, which I found extremely refreshing. He's perfect to discuss operational health because he runs a lean, mean machine at L'Ecole, from what I can tell. So it'll be super valuable for you all to learn from him. Thank you, Ryan, for being here and part of this discussion today.
Thanks, Ashley.
Next, I'm honored to introduce you to Juan Muñoz-Oca. If this is your first time meeting Juan, you're welcome. I've known Juan for many years now, prior to his current role as Chief Operating Officer for Marchesi Antinori USA, which encompasses 2 wineries in Napa, Antinori Napa Valley, and the iconic Stag's Leap wine cellars. And most recently, they took ownership of Col Solare in Red Mountain, Washington as well. Antinori has been family run for 26 generations, dating back to the 1300s in Italy, and is one of the most admired wine companies in the world. Juan oversees all operations, logistics, and inventory across all their US estates. Prior to Antinori, Juan did a short stint with O'Neill Vintners, a family-run business in Marin, California, run by the esteemed sustainability guru, Jeff O'Neill. Juan, like Ryan, joined these multi-generational family-run wineries after being a part of the St. Michel Wine Estates organization, where he had a 20-year tenure as the chief winemaker, overseeing all production operations. And he introduced many progressive creative programs that pushed the envelope for Washington wine at that time. Juan was such an obvious choice to participate today. He's open and insightful and humble, very creative, optimistic. He's a great friend and, of course, an incredible operator. So thank you, Juan, for being a part of this today.
Thank you, Ashley.
All right. With that, let's dive into the discussion and the questions. This first one's interesting for you both because you both have vast experience here in terms of winery business model. You've been a part of the big, the small, the ultra premium, the value driven. Even within these different wine segments, you may have different perspectives on how you define operational health. So let's see where this takes us. Why don't we start with you, Ryan? How do you define operational health?
Well, I thought your Google or Chat GPT definition at the beginning summed it up very well. I think and it's very appropriate for our industry, the relationship between inputs and outputs, and generating maximum output and ultimately profitability with as minimal of inputs as possible. You mentioned our operations. We L'Ecole number 41. We are indeed a lean operation. We're roughly a 50,000 case winery, but with distribution in 49 states, 15 countries, mostly through 3-tier. So we're required to be lean to maintain good margins and profitability with that business model. So we pride ourselves on that very much. But it was the relationship between inputs and outputs that really struck me from your definition.
Absolutely. How about you, Juan?
I think Ryan touched on how important it is for you to be profitable, or for those of us who are starting a business, how important it's for us to be on our way to profitability. And what I would like to add to that, as I think about operationally healthy organizations, I would like to add a growth. And it's not only growth on volume and revenue, but it's also growth within the organization as it relates to how you attack the business. I feel like an organization that has a very healthy operation, it's also an organization that shows a good amount of resilience and flexibility. So you have a plan that is solid, the foundation is solid, but the plan is kind of fluid, and you can adjust. Specifically in the wine industry, you can adjust to what Mother Nature gives you, but also what the market demands from you. And the market, as we all know it, within the wine industry, it's challenging because it's not only in our hands, right? We can do the best we can all the way until the distributor, and then between the retailer, the consumer preferences, they might throw us some curveballs that we need to be able to adjust. So in my mind, the operation is healthy when you are showing profitability, or you are on your way to profitability. You have growth, a growth mindset, and then you have a solid foundation, yet a very fluid plan.
Well said. Something that you said in the prep call, Juan, that resonated based on the market dynamics and things ever changing, is this idea of like continuous improvement. You're really never done. You're never like, well, we've achieved it. We've achieved operational success, right? It's this constant, boulder that you keep pushing up and down hills.
It's 100% relentless. As an operator, you are always learning, getting feedback, taking into consideration what your friends and your neighbors are doing and learning from them. That was kind of like my point on growth. That is not only growth in volume or revenue, but it's also internal growth, specifically about your mindset, how you think about your operation. You are looking around and taking in inputs that then you use in running your operation. But like you were saying, it's truly relentless. You are never done. And more importantly, I think as you take ownership of an operation and you settle on your own ways, I think sometimes we just do things because that's the way we just always done it. It happens often with family-run business, and having new energy that comes into the operation to see to map the operation and see it through a different lens, I think it's very valuable. I'm sure Ryan went through a little bit of that as he went into Le Col with a different perspective and seeing issues through a different lens. I think that's very helpful, and it just underlines this need for like always trying to improve, always learning, always look at your business through a different lens.
Yeah, I think what Juan said about always continuing to be mindful of what's happening in the marketplace and adapting and being flexible and resilient is incredibly important. Wine is somewhat unique in that while we have a fairly long product cycle compared to other industries, the market actually evolves fairly quickly. Anyone who's lived in the wine industry through the past few years of ups and downs can attest to that. So there's that natural tension between our long product cycle and the relatively quick shifts in the market, and that requires you to be nimble and resilient as much as possible.
That's a perfect segue into the next section, which is around planning, right? If you need to be flexible and nimble, you have to be aligning to some sort of plan. So, Laura, if you want to take us to the next slide here, I want to talk a bit about the importance of planning. It came up a bunch in our prep call. Can both of you elaborate a bit on how you approach planning and why it's important? We'll start with you.
I'll go first. So I was just telling you how I feel like the foundation has to be solid, and then the plan has to be a little bit more fluid and flexible. But because of the cadence of the business and how we are looking at what's happening, not only right now to the business, but also the grapes that we're growing through the summer will become wine at the end of the year, but they won't hit the market until sometime in the future. I think that's important for us to have this idea of you need structure. And so planning is incredibly important as it relates to setting out the cadence of your business, the expectations of your business. And the one thing that I, at the beginning of my career, I didn't think much about it, or I didn't expect much from it, was mission statements and vision statements. I think having a clear North Star of where you're going, where your business, where you want to push your business towards, helps you answer the day-to-day questions that come up on the decision-making, the day-to-day decision-making. And so I love that idea of having a North Star that will just like help you answer those questions. I think that is also part of the flexibility that you can build within your planning. So you have a foundation, you have your guardrails, your swim lane, and then within there, you can accelerate or slow down depending on the needs specific to the operation based on the market conditions or what Ryan was saying, the consumer preferences, etc. But I think as farmers, ultimately, we have to be planners and good planners. The secret ultimately is to walk a fine line between sticking to your plan and then jumping off when needed.
And Ashley, you'll remember something that we talked about in our prep call. I actually think that having a plan actually enables you to be more flexible, right? If you have a plan, it's easier to know when you're deviating from it and why. But if you don't actually plant a flag in the ground, you're just kind of, going wherever the winds take you, and you don't know when and to what degree you are deviating from a plan. And, in an industry such as ours that has just an infinite amount of variables, I think it can lend itself sometimes to paralysis by analysis. But at some point, you really just need to put a stake in the ground and say, this is what we think we're going to do. Of course, you're always looking at both what Mother Nature and the marketplace are giving you, and you adapt or deviate or modify the plan as necessary. But I think you have to start with that North Star, as Juan said.
And of course, the amount of flexibility will be different depending on the size of the organization, right? Like I think larger organizations are harder to move. It's like trying to, I don't know, like navigate with a little boat versus an aircraft carrier, right? But I think just ultimately having the idea that you want to be flexible and you want to build flexibility within your organization, it's the first step in order for you to have a very healthy planning cycle. I do love the idea that the planning will anchor you and it will put you in context, so at least you know where you're going, and that I think allows you to be smarter as it relates to being flexible and just taking a shortcut here and there.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure we have other operators on the call. I'd be interested to hear how you create and manage and communicate a plan. How do you document it? How do you come back and touch on it at important points throughout the year? Why don't we start with Juan with that one?
I think the natural cadence of the business allow us to, maybe not allow us, it's not the right. I think it forces us to get together at certain times during the year. And that cadence is very helpful for us to reassure where we're going, what our North Star is, and how we are going to get there. The cadence of the business allow us to sit down in the winter to talk about the plan that we have for the previous year, right? How many wines we were hoping to make, which ones were in each category within our portfolio, and then what Mother Nature gave us. Did we make the target amount of cases? Did we make more? Did we have to declassify a fair amount of those wines and we make less? And then I think that triggers the planning for the next season. All of this informed by the current conditions in the market. Are we selling the amount of wine that we were planning on selling in Q1? The answer to that is always no. We didn't sell the amount of wine that we were hoping to sell in Q1. But at least we have the conversation. I think revisiting the plan on a quarterly basis kind of fits with at least the cadence of the business. In our case, we at Antinori in the United States, we not only grow grapes and make wine at 3 wineries, but we also import all of our wines from Italy and Chile, and then distribute those wines here in the United States. And even for those wines that we don't make, that are made in Italy by our fellow winemakers, I think the quarterly check-in allow us to be smarter about not only what we're doing in the current calendar year, but also what to expect for the next couple of years. And we try to make that window fairly broad and think about terms of 3 years and then 10 years. So current year, 3, 5, 10. And because of the nature of the company that I work for, we also think about generations, which I think that's crazy for a lot of us in the US. But I've learned to get used to that idea of what's going to happen with this property and this wine when generation 30 is in charge, or generation 35 is in charge. So I think just like sitting down and talking about it, reviewing and adjusting on a regular basis is very helpful.
Fantastic. Does that resonate with you, Ryan? Do you have?
Absolutely. As usual, I agree with everything that Juan says. The only thing I would add to that from my perspective in my new role is, you mentioned that we are and pride ourselves on being a lean operation. Like a lot of businesses in other industries, we're also in the position of, we're a third generation business, but really having grown and evolved around a very strong and accomplished and brilliant founder who is and the infrastructure of the business evolved and developed around our founder. But I think sometimes that like a lot of businesses that evolve around strong founders, you need to build that infrastructure around the founder to help the business continue to grow and thrive for generations beyond the founder. So that's one of the things that I've tried to build to bring specifically to our planning process is, gathering as much data as possible to guide our planning and decision making. Not simply relying on trying to make and sell more than we did last year, but understand the conditions in which we operate and the what the marketplace is doing and how we sit in the marketplace and the competitive advantages and disadvantages that we have, and bringing all of that data to bear in some kind of cohesive way to our planning process. But the data gathering and being mindful of the infrastructure that you have and building your infrastructure along the way, it's sometimes feel like, again, to use an old trope, that you're building the plane as you're flying it. but hopefully we're building a better plane each time we take off.
Absolutely.
I love that point of sorry, Ashley. I love the point of building the plane as you fly. I feel at times that the progress happens every day. Like if you do today any activity better than you did yesterday, because you had a data point that you discovered, that you found, that somebody talked to you about, that was brought to your attention for whatever reason, I feel like that's progress, right? So we have the overarching goal for the company. This is our mission statement. This is our vision. This is where we're going. And then the quarterly goals and then the daily goals. And if you can make any progress on getting closer to any of those goals, including the day-to-day things, like we ran this many bottles on the bottling line yesterday, we're going to do a little bit better today, same wine, same materials, just a few more bottles, or the same amount of bottles in a shorter time. I feel like all of those are part of this like operational healthy winery in this case.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. Sometimes continuous improvement just comes down to celebrating the little wins along the way.
Right? Which is like, so you, on the one hand, you celebrate the little wins every day. On the other hand, you just always think about the big picture and like where you're going. I think that's a big part of creating maybe a culture of an operational healthy winery, which early on we learned that when you have that culture and when the operation feels efficient, when you think like your work is taking you somewhere, you do better, right? So it's like a snowball or a flywheel that starts spinning and just like fueling that fire. It's, I think, maybe the secret of not only operational efficiencies, but also having a happy organization that ultimately will be more efficient by default.
Well said, well said. And I was thinking about that too in relation to the series that we're doing. Really, operational health is the tip of the pyramid. You know, cultural and financial health are very much a part of operational health. So, yeah, so well said, Juan. Let's take a step deeper under the plan and maybe talk about some initiatives that you had planned for that were successes or lessons learned, or perhaps you didn't plan for them and they were projects that landed on your lap and you were able to be flexible and iterate. Let's start with Ryan. What are some projects that you can share with everyone that help drive operational health?
Sure. So we are at the tail end right now of a very big and important project for us, which is onboarding a new ERP system, migrating our operation to Microsoft Business Central as a foundation. We just completed the migration a couple of months ago, so we're still in kind of the working out the kinks phase, but already that has opened up a whole new world of the ability to analyze and understand our business and plan going forward. With that now in place, we are starting to work on some of the next pieces of that infrastructure that I talked about in building the infrastructure around our strong founder. The next big and important phase for us, not unlike a lot of small to medium-sized wineries, we have historically managed the business more on shipments than depletions. We have not had a centralized depletion data solution, but we are changing that, and we're preparing to onboard depletion data, centralized depletion data, and match that with our more robust business and shipment data through Business Central to give us really a complete picture of the business at any given time. So hopefully that will again enable us to make better decisions going forward. So those are the two big projects that are top of mind for us right now: ERP and centralized depletion data.
Thanks for sharing that, Ryan. Before we go over to Juan, I want to say we at InnoVint, we see a lot of different size wineries, model wineries, and you're right at that really interesting inflection point in the middle. You're like a mid-sized, larger producer at 50,000 cases. So a lot of wineries are like, do we go ERP yet or not? Do we stay on QuickBooks? Do we invest in VIP data or not yet, right? Like you're a really interesting case study of that mid-market.
You know, and as we talked about, we're the nature of our business being leaning heavily toward 3-tier than to DTC, really underscores the need for some of that infrastructure.
Makes total sense. Juan, how about you?
Interestingly enough, the Antinori family took ownership of Staxley Wine Cellars in Napa, which is a fairly large operation as it relates to winemaking. And but the family already owned a winery here in the valley, Antinori Napa Valley, which is a much smaller winery. And so some of the projects that we've worked over the last year is to bring the best of each one of them into play, like learn from the larger organization that is very layered and complex. They had silos for obvious reasons. You have silos in an organization because you put experts on the field to do a specific job. So that comes with the territory, right? So you have people doing something that they know very well. And then you have a tiny operation where everybody wears every hat and everybody does everything. And I think like they putting the two together, sometimes I feel like they are bookends of the wine industry. And a lot of the work that we've done over the last year is trying to learn the best of each one of them, the flexibility of the family owned, everybody does whatever needed, whenever it's needed. And and then the structure of a more layered organization, and then put them together. And I have to say, ERP and the software that supports your operations, the data gathering and analyzing capabilities that they give us are probably foundational to have a healthy organization. Like I wouldn't be able to do what we do better every day if I wasn't able to measure the results. And that goes from pruning and how much we spend per acre, or how long it takes us to do an acre in the vineyard, all the way to the warehouses that we use to distribute our wines on the East Coast, on the West Coast. If we don't have data that we can analyze and then that we can benchmark, I think it'd be impossible for us to find ourselves in an efficient and healthy organization.
Absolutely. That's interesting, Juan. For you, did you come into the Stag's Leap organization with an ERP already in place that you inherited, or did you go through the discovery process to pick one?
We did. We came into Stag's Leap Wine Cellars and already had an ERP that was too expensive and too big for us. It was JDE.
Mm.
And we were doing QuickBooks at Antinori Napa Valley. And so I think that it's a good example of like the bookends of the wine industry. We decided to go for a new ERP. I feel your pain, Ryan. We implemented NetSuite last year in record time, which also means that we made a fair amount of mistakes that we are now fixing. But this idea of finding a good balance between the two organizations took us to an ERP that then again, it's the source of the truth. And I feel like it's so important to have a unique source of data. You have to make yourself an expert in how to extract the right reports. And this is true for every piece of software that we use at the winery, from add code to run the vineyard operations all the way to VIP and everything in between. I feel like learning how to extract smart and insightful reports out of the software that allow us to support what we do, it's perhaps one of the most important pieces of like organizational health as it relates to efficiencies.
Absolutely. If I'm to sum that up, I would say you're both saying you can't drive growth and operational success without being data-driven.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, let's talk about some challenges or mistakes that you've experienced or seen other wineries experience that may be good lessons learned for the audience. Juan, anything come to mind that you've seen?
Oh my goodness, I could write a book about mistakes that I have made. So I think when I think about it, I step a little bit backwards and give myself a little bit of perspective. One thing that I learned actually not too long ago within my professional life is that although we tell ourselves the wine is different, it's truly not. As it relates to the business and how we manage the business, there's a lot for us to learn from just regular business management. And I think at times we just don't open ourselves to learn from other industries. We do not look at other industries to find best practices. And I think that's a missing opportunity for us to learn from other farmers that do a different crop, even when those crops might not be a specialty or as profitable as grapes. I think sometimes we don't see ourselves as manufacturers. And I understand why. A bottle of Ferguson from Le Col number 41 is not the same as a bottle of water, right? But I think there are parts of the world of manufacturing that are very interesting and very insightful, and we should be able to allow ourselves to learn from them. That came to me not too long ago. I had told myself the wine was unique because of the cadence, because of the planning process, because of the unique nuances of how many wines are in the market and all of that, you know. And the reality is there's a lot for us to learn from other industries. So I've been paying a lot more attention to what best in class looks like in industries that you will think they're not associated with wine, and learning a good amount of what they do and what their best practices look like for them, and then try to figure out how to bring that into what we do. What are best practices for an organic indigo producer in Georgia, and how can I bring that into a Cabernet Sauvignon producer in Napa Valley type of thing. So that is a mistake. I never looked outside the wine industry before, and I am now, and it's a wonderful world out there. It's crazy, but it's wonderful. More as it relates to operations, I think the number one mistake that I've seen and that I've been part of, and again, this is also just cultural in the wine business. We do things the same way we've done it before. And it's a big deal when you work for a family, and it's a big deal when you work for generations, because this is what grandpa did, this is what his dad did. And I think that's a mistake. If we don't allow ourselves to see our day-to-day through a different lens, I think we will never learn how to do it better. So those are my mistakes, the mistakes that come to mind as it relates to the experiences that I've had in the past.
And I think one that comes to mind for me actually relates to Juan's second point of kind of doing things the way they've always been done. But I would characterize that in some cases as complacency. This sense that, people will always come to your tasting room. Your wine club will always continue to grow. Your distributors will always sell more wine than they sold last year. But as we know, none of those things are always true. And as we said earlier, the wine industry is just unrelenting, and you have to always be anticipating the next catastrophe on the horizon, whether it's in the vineyard or in the marketplace. And I think, the old saying that past performance is the best predictor of future behavior. There's some truth to that, but there's also some danger in that. And that is when you assume that things will always continue as they have, sometimes it can lead you to making mistakes that you should have seen coming.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk about how to measure some of this. Measuring operational success is hard for the reasons that we've talked about just in these last 30 minutes. But what objectives, initiatives, KPIs are you currently measuring? And then how do you approach benchmarking? How do you know how you're performing in relation to other wineries? How about you, Ryan? Why don't you take this one first?
Well, I'll start on the benchmarking side of things. I'm very fortunate and grateful to have a great network of colleagues who are CEOs, COOs, GMs of wineries to lean on for advice, and thankfully to share data confidentially about how our businesses are doing. So that is incredibly valuable from a benchmarking perspective. In terms of measuring operational success, as I said earlier, we are trying to build our infrastructure to have more and better data to measure our operations by. But I would say, even with the relatively simple tools that we have in place now, we are constantly looking out many years in advance to anticipate obviously supply and demand, our product mix, pricing out into the future, and just being very intentional about how we design the business going forward. But we are in the process of onboarding more tools to help us measure our progress along the way, but we're constantly looking for that continuous improvement that Juan alluded to earlier.
We talked about this actually a little bit earlier on how do you measure operational success. This idea that you it's relentless, you do it every day. You lean on data and then you take a look at the data, trying to find insights, right? So you look at data, for example, how many times did you touch a wine from grape to bottle? And then you try to figure out, is that too many times? Does it feel like too much to you? Based on your operational capabilities, the distribution of buildings within your winery, where the barrel room is situated, and of course your winemaking techniques, right? So do you touch the wine while it's in oak? How many times? How often? Etc. But then you find yourself with a number of touches that make you comfortable, and then you measure yourself against them, and then you try to do it in less touches next year, because every touch should have a cost associated with it. There's not only a financial cost, but it's also the time of the team, the things that we're focusing on. Maybe when you have people racking a wine from a barrel, perhaps for a rack that is not needed, that's a missed opportunity to have those folks and their talents doing something else. So I feel like just looking at the data that you have available to you and try to find insights, it's a big part of measuring operational success. And the benchmarking, I echo Ryan's sentiment of the community in the wine industry. It's so generous as it relates to information, the candidness that we are able to talk to our colleagues about our issues and our challenges. I think that's a great part of the appeal of the wine industry for many of us, the sense of community. So of course that it's a major source of benchmarking. I'm lucky enough to be part of a group of wineries from many different geographies, and that allows me to talk to my colleagues and ask them, so how do you do A, B, and C? Talk to vineyard managers from different geographies and understand what their challenges are, and then read into those answers to see what you can bring into your operational success, or what success looks to you in your geography, which I think all of that is something that we can do regardless of the size of the winery that we work with, regardless of if we are part of a larger organization or not. Just being curious, it's free, and I think allow us to just like bring insights into our operations. If I had to give a younger me a massive piece of advice early on in my professional life, I would have said, just you need to be a lot more curious about things all the time.
Well said. Go ahead, Ryan.
I was just gonna say, I have to go back to something Juan said about the element of opportunity cost in what we do is so incredibly important, especially for us as a lean organization. Every time you're asking someone to do something, it means they're not able to do something else. And always finding that that highest and best use for every member of your team, or every piece of equipment, or every piece of software or infrastructure is just so incredibly important. And measuring that opportunity cost is in and itself measurement and just incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. In the essence of time, we have some great questions here I want to make sure we hit. This is the last one for you two up front. What are 1 to 2 words of advice or something you wish you knew 5 years ago that you can share? Ryan, go first.
Well, I joked about this in our prep call, but going back to that that notion of benchmarking or camaraderie within the industry, I would say my my few words of advice are, you're not alone. We are very fortunate to be in an industry where most people are very open with advice and willing to trust each other with, confidential information to help others improve. And that notion of the rising tide lifts all boats is in my experience very true in the wine industry. And I think sometimes people are reluctant or unwilling to take advantage of that. And I really think that people should embrace the collegiality that we are so fortunate to have in our industry.
I think that's perfect. I mean, I could not have said it better. Ryan, you are on the money. There are so many communities out there and so many ways to get to those communities. Just follow your curiosity and connect with somebody through your neighbor, connect with somebody through the lovely folks of InnoVint, connect with somebody through LinkedIn. There's many ways for you to connect with a community of people that are willing and able to help, if not, but just showing you their challenges, which will inform if those might be yours.
Mm-hmm. If I'm to offer mine too, that touch on both of those comments, what I've seen from my time operating wineries was you get very comfortable operating within your insular network, often within your region. And I found a lot of growth when I went outside of my region, even with a similar producer producing the same types of wines, but they were in Sonoma instead of the Santa Cruz Mountains, or, like being able to be curious enough to explore and find others that are open to helping you is key.
Yep.
All right. Thank you both so much. We have about 8 minutes left. There's a couple of great questions in here that I will pose to you now. There's been 2 around lean. Lean has been mentioned a couple of times, I think, especially by you, Ryan. What do you mean by lean? Are you referring to lean practices? Can you specify lean operations in the wine industry? I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, good question. I don't know, back to our measurement comments, I don't know if I can quantify, but I think I can qualify what I mean by lean. When I think about lean in our operations, it really comes down to infrastructure. So human infrastructure, systems infrastructure, processes. So we, speaking only for our business, in terms of human infrastructure, headcount for a winery of our size with a distribution network of 49 states and 15 countries, we are a very small team. And we have to work each one of us has to work very hard as a result. When it comes to systems infrastructure, as I mentioned, we found ourselves limited by our previous ERP solution. But the cost and work to onboard a more powerful solution was certainly daunting, but we decided to take it on anyway. And that has unlocked capabilities that we didn't even realize were there because we were existing within a leaner infrastructure. Those are a couple of examples. So again, I know those aren't quantifiable, but hopefully are qualified examples.
The one thing that I will add to that response is this idea of like simplifying what you do. I think it's a wonderful step towards having a linear operation. And I know that simplifying is very complex, but simplifying the route to market, simplifying the way in which you receive your fruit, like it applies to so many points, touch points of our business. If you have that in the back of your mind as you analyze your operations, I think you're well on your way to have a leaner operation. Just like the simplest way is normally the most efficient way.
Love it, Juan. So true. Okay, this next one came up when we were talking about planning. He says, provide some examples of planned deviation. and how it panned out?
I have one that it's just driven by the nature of our business. We are just became part of at Stackslip Wine Cellars. We just became part of a larger family-owned wine company that sells our wines internationally and in many countries. And a good example is just like moving away from things that we've done just because we've done it that way. We had an allocation of wines that were made for the domestic market and an allocation of wines that were made for our international market. The family in Italy will bottle their wines in shiners and then put those shiners away for a certain amount of time and then come back, and they had never encountered this idea of like, I don't have enough wine to send to enter country with the specific label that they need. So a change for us was like just lean into their learnings and do a lot of just bottle as shiners, and we're going to put these wines to bed until they're ready to be released naked, and then we're going to come in hopefully with a better perspective of how much wine we need for France and how much wine we need for South America and Asia, and then relabel those. And of course, our challenge was to figure out how to do so without adding cost to our wines. But that's a good example of being willing to just like maybe change a little bit the parameters of how you attack your operations. Of course, there's like a number of other examples, but I think more importantly, just being willing to do things differently because things happen. It's a big part of just being flexible and then changing something that was already planned for maybe years.
The first example that comes to mind for me, and again, I'm just a year and 5 days into my new role here, but we when I joined a year ago, the plan for the balance of last year and the first part of this year was from a portfolio standpoint was largely a continuation of the portfolio as it had existed for a number of years. So we, using what data we had available to us, we took a bit of a fresh look and have made some changes to our varietal mix, volumetrically in introducing a couple of new products, shifting production even within varietals, between different tiers of our wine. So I think, general portfolio optimization based on data that informed us that perhaps there were opportunities to realize that our existing plans were not fully accounting for.
Thank you for those examples. All right, there's one more, and I'm chuckling reading it. This is the $1 million question. In a market that is changing so much in a short period of time, how do you choose and define your assumptions in order to plan demand and production?
I think they just read the definition of a chief operating officer, right? That is, as you said, the $1 million question. I hate to sound like a broken record. I mean, obviously getting your hands on as much data as you can. One of the things I've been spending a lot of my time on over the past year, again, because I'm new to my role, but I think it's always important to do, is staying close to your customers, right? Your distributor customers, your account customers, and really understanding, again, in a qualitative way, what's going on in the market, in addition to the quantitative data that you see from all those sources out there, and not holding your plans or your operations as so precious that they can't be changed, right? I mean, we made some changes to our portfolio in the last year, changes in production of certain wines, introductions of new wines that were fairly dramatic for our operation, for a business that's been in existence for 40 years. So the willingness to see and respond to what the market is giving you is incredibly important.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, you harvest insights from the data that you get from the market, and then you react accordingly. The only thing I have to add to that is something that Marchesi Antinori, who's 25th generation winemaker, told me earlier this year. He said, I appreciate all the flexibility that you have in mind for our operations, but wine quality comes first. And so you lean on your wine, you lean on what you're good at, and you make the best product you can, and then you let the market work it out. So I think it's, winemaking many times is about balance or tension, whichever you prefer. And I think there is a balance between doing what's right for the market without deviating from doing what's best for your wine, because ultimately wine quality will drive sales and everything that we've been talking about, right? Profitability, growth, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to do it all. You can't do just one.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah. I was gonna say, what a great note to end on. Thank you both so much. This was incredibly valuable. Really appreciate your time. I think Laura's going to pop back on here and say some final words.
Yes, thank you so much to all three of you. And a quick reminder of our next series in this, or next session in this series about cultural health, which will be happening next Wednesday. If you haven't registered yet, we'll follow up with a link so you can get on that one as well. We will share the recording from today with everyone. And I just want to thank everyone for spending some time with us on Monday. Have a great week ahead. And thank you so much to our excellent panelists, Ryan, Juan, and Ashley.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week.
So much.
Thank you.